Welcome to Relationship, where real-life couple Justin and Candise share their keeping it real perspective on the ins and outs of their personal and professional experiences, navigating the ups and downs of partnerships in life and business. They will also offer practical advice for maintaining strong, healthy, fun, and successful relationships in life and business. If you're ready for comedic and insightful exploration of life, love, law, business, and everything else in between, you're in the right place. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. Here are your hosts, Justin and Candise.
All right, everybody, welcome to Relationship. Today we meet Byron and Krissy Wolfe, the dynamic couple behind CFOAF, a company driving profit performance for small businesses through legendary financial leadership. Welcome to the show, Byron and Krissy. Nice to have you guys.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks for having us.
Well, we always start off with our podcast, obviously wanting to know a little bit about you guys. So if you can just take a moment, let us and the audience know who you guys are, what you do, when you guys, decided to go into this insane roller coaster ride of being, partners in business and in life, and tell us a little bit about, CFOAF.
Okay, so Byron and I have been together almost 18 years. We met about a year after I got a divorce, and our very first date was actually working together. And that has kind of framed our entire relationship. And we've been in business together since before we were married, actually before we were even engaged. So we've started, operated, and sold businesses together. And so we've been in business together about 15 years. And we have lots of good insider tips to it and some things not to do. But all in all, we really enjoy working together. And I'll let Byron tell you a little bit about the business.
Okay.
Yeah, so like Krissy said, we've been in business together. We've started some, we've built them, we've sold a few. We have a few that are still going. We found that we work really well together. It doesn't mean that it's perfect, but we trust each other, implicitly, which is huge. And so that trust aspect is a huge part of it, because it really frees you up to pursue things without having to worry about if somebody has your back, doesn't have your back. And so we started CFOAF. We saw a huge need for this, just kind of that financial leadership that involved the personalities and the kind of the sociology, the psychology of it as well, which, my wife, Krissy, she has multiple degrees, psychology, sociology, all these things. So she's very good at that people aspect. I'm just a boring CPA. So I have that going for me. So I'm really good with the numbers and advising people on those, the numbers. But as we know, you can know your numbers, you can know them inside and out, but if you don't know how to interact with people, you don't have to, if you don't interact with your clients, your customers, your employees, just knowing the numbers isn't enough to make it work. So we knew that was kind of the dynamic duo for us, is to be able to provide that with that fractional CFO, the tax strategy, tax mitigation process for small businesses and individuals. And so we started CFOAF. Really just to fill that need that we saw in the industry, and that we saw with a lot of our friends that were in business and reaching out to us and asking us how we did it, how we worked well together, how we were able to scale and grow. And so that led us to get this going. We've been in it for a while together, and it's been good.
What's a while? How long have you guys been?
We've been doing this business for about 2 years. Yeah. So it's pretty young.
But we've been in business together since 2007. So
right.
2008. Yeah.
Prior to starting CFOAF, what type of businesses did you guys start together before this?
Our first business was a power sports dealership in Tennessee, which we ran for several years. And then we started a leasing company while we were there. And leasing company was kind of what allowed us to get out of the dealership, which wasn't something that we wanted to do, being in a retail industry for several years, while also we're a blended family. So trying to kind of manage having a personal life and a love life and a vacation life and focus on kids while trying to have a dealership that is open 72 hours a day was just super exhausting. So we knew that that wasn't sustainable. So we opened a leasing company that was related to that business, but it allowed us to sort of phase out of the dealership, but still retain a lot of our income from the dealership that was way less hands-on. And then we also had a very successful dog boarding business in Tennessee for about 5 years before we moved here, while Byron was focusing primarily on CFO work. And then when we moved out here is when we started really combining our skills back together again and to do the fractional CFO services. But we have not a very like a super heavy kind of HR side of it, but a pretty practical, HR aspect of our business to help, make sure that we're filling the right roles for our clients. We don't fill them for them, but we help them decide which ones to fill and how.
Got it. Now, let me ask you guys a question, because you guys did a couple of businesses before you did CFOAF. What would you say were the best lessons or takeaways or skill sets or understandings of each other and working with each other that you took with you from your prior experiences into CFOAF?
I would say lanes is probably the biggest one. So we knew very quickly when we started working together that there was things that I was very, very good at. And, I could stay in and I could do them well. I unfortunately had the expectation that everybody could do them well and in a very short period of time like I could. It's just not the reality. Right. And there were things that she could do very, very well that I either didn't like or wasn't, well, probably both, wasn't good at, didn't enjoy, but she was very good at. So allowing her to kind of stay in her lane and me stay out of it, and just, again, that trust aspect of trusting that she knows what she's doing and she can crush it in that space, and then her giving me that same trust level and know that I'm going to do, my lanes extremely well, allowed us to really, all the stuff that fell in the middle, it really allowed us to really segment that and to either tackle it together or create the SOP and kind of the controls in place so that when we hired somebody, we knew exactly what they needed to do. We knew who was responsible for managing them or oversight. We knew where the things that bled over each other, where they impacted, and we knew how to handle that. And so when we sold the dealership, we had the leasing company and the dog boarding business, and the dog boarding business was really a lot more Krissy's, arena. I helped very, very little. She was interacting with clients, customers, employees, all that stuff, the stuff that she really enjoyed doing. That was a big reason I didn't enjoy the dealership, is because our staff got really big. I loved my staff, but it's just draining. It's not something I'm good at. And we had a huge client base, huge customer base. And so I got to step out of the stuff I didn't enjoy. The leasing was all financials, building the plans, writing the format, very technical stuff that I loved. So I was able to do a lot more with the leasing company in line with the things that I really enjoy doing. She got to do a lot of stuff with the dog boarding business that she really loved doing. And so having that kind of step back from the dealership where it was a lot of overlap, kind of focusing on the areas that we really loved and we were really good at, allowed us to even better define those roles. And so when we came back together with CFOAF, we had the plan in place. So it wasn't necessarily that we didn't enjoy working together. We did, but working somewhat apart with much less overlap allowed us to really figure out where we were good, where we were having the most wins, so that when we came back together, we really were able to create that dynamic duo relationship where we had very clearly defined lines and separation of duties, separation of responsibilities, and it's been really good. It's not perfect again, but it's really great. We really enjoy working together.
When we hear, partners saying it's not perfect, that signals to me that there are still some challenges or certain kinks that you're still working out. What might some of those look like in your business and what you're going through right now? Now that you're 2 years into it, what would you say, because you say it's not perfect. So when you say it's not perfect, that's what it signals to me. What would you say is the biggest, ticket items that you guys are still kind of figuring out?
Because luckily ours is perfect, so we just need to hear from other people.
Yeah. Fortunately, I feel like when we started the dealership, it was really his business. And so I had to do things his way. And so there was times when he didn't really understand the value of the skills and the ideas that I brought to the business. So when I wanted to focus on branding, when I wanted to focus on marketing, all of those things, he was just more of a, if you build it, they will come type of person, just sell the bikes. And I was like, I don't know anything about a Gixxer. I don't know anything about a Ninja. I don't know anything about any of this stuff. Can I learn it? Yes, but I wasn't particularly interested in selling. I wanted to create the vibe that brought the people in. And so in that arena, we butted heads because he didn't want to spend money on branding and marketing if he felt like he could just sell to the people who walked in the door. So there were times when we definitely disagreed on like the vision and how to get there. Then when I had my business, I could do it my way. And I was very much into the branding and the marketing and creating a niche where I could serve a very specific clientele in a very specific way. And then when we came together, it was different in that, like, we both did know what we were good at. And he also had, social media is blowing up so much that the things that he didn't really value in me before, he values a lot more in me now. And I definitely value his technical aspect quite a bit because it drains me. So I would say when we say it's not perfect, mainly it's just because sometimes we are moody or we have bad days, or it's more of just like, it's just the nuances of being like a couple and doing literally everything together. And sometimes that can be, like, okay, I need some me time, I need to step away. So those are more, we don't have a lot of like, I would say our challenges are more just like human challenges more so than they are the business challenges.
And have you figured out ways of dealing with what might appear to be the imbalance of me time and us time as a couple and getting down to business and then dealing with life in and of itself, families, all that kind of stuff? Like, have you guys figured out that secret sauce?
I think in a lot of ways. I mean, for one thing, our kids are grown, so that makes it a little more palatable to manage all of those different aspects. We have a desk, or I have a desk in his office, but I rarely use it unless it's for a very specific cause. And I feel like I need to be there to analyze a certain conversation or situation. But I have my own office. I even have, because he's on Zooms all day. And even though we have a roomy house, I can hear his voice everywhere. And I'm kind of get that sensory overload. And so we both love our alone time. But for me, when I say me time, I'm like, I need no noise. I need no anything. So we have, I actually took a closet in our downs. We have a casita, like an attached mother-in-law suite. And I took the closet and I took the shelves out and I made it so cute and so me. And I closed the door and I turn on the fan and I turn on my like whatever sound journey music or whatever it is, this frou-frou stuff. And I do my essential oils. And then I'm like, everybody be gone, And so that's how I cope. And, and then of course we manage our moods we work out quite a bit and do things like that. But for me, it's pulling away and just being like, okay, I need to not be overloaded with sound and stimulation for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Communication's huge. We had to figure out that like, we have to kind of be a little blunt sometimes, and so there are things that, if we went back 10 years, we would have been much less, I guess, upfront, about like, we'll both say to each other sometimes, or, we'll just very bluntly like, hey, I need some alone time, gotcha. No worries. See you in a little bit, or like, hey, I need to get away for a minute, and so 10 years ago, we probably would have felt like we needed to have a way more of an explanation, like, oh, hey, I love you so much. And,
You're my favorite person.
To do with you. But, there's just this desire to kind of get up, not from you, but from so you would over explain. And now we're just like, hey, bro.
I need it. That's
it. Right. Go watch one of your stupid shows.
You, right? Yeah, I will say that. I'm like, hey, go watch some woman porn or whatever.
It's not really porn.
It's,
but I love that.
It's Outlander, for the love of God. It's on Netflix. He calls it lady porn. It's just.
Are you talking? Was it called lady porn, or was it Sex Life? That show.
It's Outlander. It's based on a book series. He calls it lady porn.
Got it.
Anything I think I'm gonna steal that from you, Byron. I like that.
It's historical fiction, guys. It's historical romantic fiction. And he's like, go watch your lady porn. I'm like, well, go watch one of your stupid 911 shows where everybody's a hero. They're terrible TV.
Yeah. And we'll break away. We'll go watch terrible TV, or whatever, and just get some time just to kind of reset. And like, we don't take offense at needing that. It's really blunt, open, honest communication. We talk about like kind of how we feel. Like she'll say, hey, I really feel like I need more time. Like I need you to sit down and look me in the eye and let's have a conversation. Right. And so
he does this.
I do. I stare at her.
That's something I would do. So.
Very passive aggressive. For guys, it's hard for us to have a conversation. Like we need a phone or we need some kind of activity. When guys hang out with guys, they never look at each other. Right. There's always some kind of activity while we're talking.
That's correct. I would agree. There's a drink in front of you. There's a game on. There's something going on at all times.
Oh yeah, some of the best conversations I've had with guy friends are sitting at a bar, a drink in front. We're looking the same direction, watching a sports whatever, like watching the game or something, and you communicate like this, this parallel communication. But with her, like there are times she needs my full attention. She needs me to look her in the eye, like have this conversation, be fully invested. And I get that.
Well, also I think that women like to go deep a little bit more. We need to be heard. We need to be acknowledged in certain ways. We need you to really get what, we're feeling and what we're thinking.
That's the difference between a guy's dinner and a girl's dinner. When she goes out to dinner with her friends, like it could be a 7:00 dinner. I won't see her till midnight or 11 o'clock. I go to a 7 o'clock dinner. It's like, you're back at like 8:15, 8:30. Like, what you guys do? Like, we had dinner. Talked a little bit. I mean, like there was no game on. We just talked for like an hour, and that's a lot.
Right.
That's the end of it.
That's true.
Oh yeah, and she'll tell me about her conversation, and then I'll have one of those dinners. She's like, "What'd y'all talk about?" I'm like, "I don't know, nothing." Like we had to talk about something. Like I don't know, something. I don't know what we talk. Like we don't really have a good answer because it can be very, very surface level, right? Like we don't have those super deep. Because honestly, when you're eating, you do have some kind of activity you are eating, but like really the deepest conversations generally occur in like an actual activity. You're out hunting or playing sports or, golf or like, you're doing some activity, not so directly focused. But.
So the weirdest way like that, some of the best conversations that he and I have are on our bikes, like outdoors riding our bikes. And so before it got crazy hot, we were riding our bikes to and from the gym. Don't think we're that like elite or anything because it's like a 2-minute bike ride. So like we're not special. And our bikes are also electric. So if we want to like use that feature, it's there.
Yeah.
But what we would do is like a lot of times before it got hot, when we would get back from the gym, we would take a couple of laps around our neighborhood. And that parallel, conversation that he likes so much. But we would sometimes talk about that, like the really tough stuff, like maybe there's somebody on our team that's not really pulling their weight. And we're trying to decide, like, do we keep her? Do we retrain her yet again? Do we redirect her into a different project? Those are difficult conversations, not necessarily because there's tension between us, although there has been with those situations. But then just like, it's tough to decide those types of things. And so we would just kind of loop around and talk about it. And that was, we can sometimes get a lot done just doing something silly like that. But the nice thing is it's not in front of the TV. So there's not competing stimuli. We're not holding our phones. You obviously can't, you're just not staring at each other, which I'm completely fine with, as long as like, I feel like the conversation is accomplishing what it needs to accomplish.
It's funny that I want to go back to what you just said, because that seems to be a reoccurring theme with a lot of our guests is, when you are getting successful, you're also thinking about scaling, and you are scaling. And part of scaling is obviously building your team. And what I often hear from our guests is that, X amount of time we spent kind of figuring each other out. And, now that we've kind of figured each other out, strengths and weaknesses, everybody's staying in their lanes. The challenge has ultimately been for everybody. And what the status of the challenge from really the point of growth, and it is ongoing. And our last podcast guest actually said, entrepreneurs are not great hires, because you ultimately try to hire people that are just like you. And so have you guys figured out, or is that still a challenge for you guys in dealing with your team members? Or is that something that you guys just never really was a struggle for you guys in dealing with team members and hiring and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, it doesn't matter how I have a background in HR and recruitment, and it doesn't matter how much practice you have. Like, nobody's perfect at hiring. People can be different in an interview than they are in real life,
100%. Right.
And so that can be a point of stress, certainly. Really, our issue, and I don't want to call it issue, our dynamic more so is that he doesn't really like to manage people, but he will do what I ask him to do. So if I say, hey, could you create a training video where you explain this concept in more detail than what we've explained it, he will do that. Although I may have to ask him 3 times, but he will do that. But he doesn't really like, I would venture to say, you don't really like confrontation. And while I don't love it, it's something that I try to lovingly deal with. But I think the hardest point for us right now is like actually letting people go, because he's always been the one to let people go. But now that I'm really managing the team more so than he is, it's like, how does he just pop in and be like, and you're fired? Like, you don't really know me.
But that's also a skill in and of itself.
I've gotten very good at it. I mean, I've gotten good at it over the last, being in business for the last 13 years.
Would you like to do it? Would you like to fire somebody for us? I'm just kidding.
I'm great. I just go, I have different approaches for different people. That's how you have to do it. Everybody's different.
But I'm curious though, Krissy, you kept saying, if I need him to do something, I'll just ask him. Do you try to avoid having to deal with tough conversations with team members, and that's why you're asking him?
Sometimes I don't typically mind tough conversations. No, I'll ask. No, more so for training. Like if I don't understand how to do something, I have to have him explain it, because I don't deal with some of the technical stuff. I don't really tend to avoid difficult conversations as long as I understand what I'm talking about. If I don't understand what I'm talking about, he either needs to partner with me or he needs to do it.
Got it.
Hey.
How do you guys deal with conflict?
With each other or with everybody else?
We could do it in 2 parts. How do you deal with conflict with each other? And then how do you deal with conflict, you guys against the world?
Yeah, so we're on different sides of conflict. So, she is, in my opinion, she likes to, if it exists, she wants to get into it, get it solved, move on. And I am more the type that if there is conflict, I need a minute to absorb it, kind of think about it, figure out the game plan, come back to it. And so knowing that, she's very good at giving me some space, but she wants to check it off, as quick as possible. And so she'll give me a little bit of space, but whereas I would probably just avoid it forever and be like, hey, we'll talk about this, in 40 years. She's like, hey, I gave you space, like, let's go, so
right.
we have to kind of talk it through. And we have to know, like, she's very aware of it, though if the conflict is bigger than normal, there are times I'm just like, okay, fine, do whatever you want, and she knows that that's not a real response. Right. And I know that too, but like, that's kind of my go-to when I'm kind of overwhelmed. And so she knows that's not a real response. So she'll give me a little bit of space. We'll come back to it. We'll address it. So a lot of times it can be taken care of, in that first one, but sometimes it can take a little time because, I have to kind of come to it in sections, whereas she's ready to deal with it like immediately.
Always.
Well, not always, but most of much more than I am. She's ready to knock it out and like, let's just be done with it. Let's just move on. So she has to give me some space, some patience to kind of absorb what occurred and come up with a game plan. And then we can kind of deal with it. But again, it's all about communication. When it comes to like dealing with conflict with other people, she has to kind of remind me, like I'll generally deal with stuff, once or twice. And then if it like repeats over and over again, I just get kind of frustrated and I want to shut down.
Yep.
And so, which I think is normal-ish, but so she's very good at being like, hey, like you need to deal with this. Like you need. And so like my latest response is like, well, let's just like schedule it, because if we schedule it now, like I have a deadline, I have to deal with it. Like, so she'll put stuff on my calendar, which if people saw it, they'd be like, that's ridiculous. Why is that on your calendar? But it works for me, right? Because like if it's scheduled, like I'm like, okay, crap, I've procrastinated as long as I can. Like it's on the schedule now. So now I got to deal with whatever this issue is. So, even though it's probably frustrating for her because she's probably like, why don't you just deal with it? Like putting it on the schedule is great for me because it gives me kind of a deadline. I have to get my head wrapped around it. Now I've got to deal with it. Like,
And that's not internal team stuff. That's more external stuff. Like if he has a client or a partner issue that he needs to discuss with them and it's kind of brewing, it may take him a little bit of time to figure out, like he'll get frustrated multiple times before sometimes he'll address things. And it's not my issue to address, it's not, I'm not in an agreement with them. I'm not in a situation with them. He is. And so we'll usually just have to talk about those things several times and really just sort of reason through, where the frustration is coming in. And then finally he'll usually deal with it, but it takes a minute. He does not like conflict. He does not like conflict.
I don't think anybody likes conflict, but
I think he's extra uncomfortable with it.
But let me ask you guys, if you guys go through this, now that we're talking about conflict, I'm curious if other couples that are also partners in business do this. So I don't like conflict, but I don't like conflict, but I communicate in a very, very direct way, which you would think are very, I guess, opposing type of characteristics. Like if you don't like conflict, then maybe you would come up with a much flowery delivery rather than being as direct as I am. And so because I am a very direct person and it can rub people the wrong way, I often use Justin as my problem solver, or I make him like kind of like the scapegoat to deal with all the shit. Because, he just has a way about him. He's just, it's a lot. The delivery is just much, much better. It's a lot less antagonistic. I would say I'm calling myself out. I own it. Do you guys do that? Like, do you guys kind of force the other one to do the things that, the kind of the dirty work for you? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I think if I just see him like perpetually frustrated in a situation, I'm just going to like push him to deal with it. But, and I think he does the same for me, but I don't think we're necessarily like, we're definitely differently gifted, but I don't know that either one of us is so great at dealing with conflict that one of us is the standout conflict dealer with her. It would be like, that's why we're trying to get you to do it for us. I mean, it sounds like you got it covered. Like, we'll just call you anytime we have issues.
Yeah.
Justin's fantastic at it. I will tell you.
I could fire someone. They don't even know they're fired yet. I mean, because they leave on such good.
that they're fired. That's the amazing thing. I'm like, Justin, what was the whole point of that conversation?
It's like, a mutual parting. It's a mutual part. I get them. I got them to agree that maybe here's not the best place. So we all walked away in agreement that that's the best thing to do.
No, I agree with that.
He's amazing at firing people, but with this, not with the fully remote situation, makes it a little different. I felt like when it was like, hey, let's, come into my office and let's have a conversation. It was the same thing. He was just like, I just see you really thriving in this other environment so much better, and he's helped people and we've helped people find jobs that were a better fit for them when they weren't a good fit for us. But I do think it's a little bit harder when you don't ever really directly work with somebody, and they're just not putting out great work, because you're trying to identify why is that, is it lack of clarity? Is it lack of instruction? Is it lack of motivation? What is it? It's so much harder to identify in a remote situation versus on the sales floor or whatever in a dealership.
And I think it's also challenging from generational issues, right? If you're from a certain generation, I'm in my, mid to late 40s, and, a lot of my team members are, a generation or two younger than me. And that's, oftentimes very frustrating
because we have a very young team right now. We have a very young team right now.
And so, kind of the way that I was raised, which was the school of hard knocks and tough love, I know I can't do with a, 20-year-old or 25-year-old, where I have to first go through, what your feelings are. Why do you feel this way? And that's not a part of my vernacular. It just isn't. But, and I've had to shift it, and I don't like being inauthentic. So when I go through the certain processes with younger team members, I kind of feel like I'm being inauthentic, because I'm trying to give it the real go to solve the problem and to get you. But because I wasn't trained that way, I wasn't raised that way, I don't have the patience for it, because what's going through my mind is, I don't care about feelings. I care about facts. I want to know factually what is happening in this situation. If you can tell me factually what occurred and then tell me the feelings that came out of those facts, all right, you might get me. Mm-hmm. But if you want to jump through the facts and just talk about the feelings, I automatically go to a place of, you're not going to go there with me. It's a sense of entitlement. You are, gaslighting the situation. My mind starts spiraling, and I'm like, why do you keep wanting to talk about feelings? I want to talk about the facts of what you did or you didn't do.
So I deal with the facts and the feelings, and it just works. So
No, you deal with more of the feelings.
I deal with the feelings and the facts at the same time. It's not one or the other.
A lot of our team is offshore in the Philippines. Not all, but, a few are. And the nice part about that is they have a really great work ethic.
Yes, yeah. We have one too. We have a VA as well.
They don't ever tell me about their feelings either, which is super. They'll tell me about their lives. Sometimes they'll say, we're having really bad weather, and, my son is scared and he's crying or whatever. And I'm very empathic, and I'll say, hey, if you need to take the day off to deal with, your situation, whatever, do what you need to do. We're praying for your family, your safety, all of that. But they're less likely to do some of the entitled things that maybe, I don't know, maybe if Americans come off as more entitled. When I had the dog boarding business, I had a lot of young women and some guys that worked for me, a lot of high schoolers and college students. And I guess their feelings never bother me, but I'm like you, let's get back to the point. If you're late and the dogs are counting on you and they can't count on you, then you're letting living creatures down, and that's not okay. So I'm sorry that you had you're going through a breakup, but if you can't perform your job, then what are we going to do about it?
Right.
So probably a little bit more like your hubby here, of a little bit of both. I can usually do a little bit of both. But the facts matter. They remain. You still have to do your job,
Yeah. Yeah. And they start crying, I'm just done. Like, that's like my kryptonite. It's like if I'm having a conversation and the tears come, I'm just like, okay, well, like, all right, we'll come back to this later. Can't deal with it. Like, I'm out.
Sure. Well, I want to ask you guys a little question about the CFO, or you guys call it the fractional CFO business, correct? And I'm asking this not only, obviously because we want to, showcase what it is that you guys do, but we're also curious as business owners in really, because I've heard of this fractional CFO concept for a little over a year now. And I always look at Justin, I'm like, do we need what help people identify?
Like we're a small law firm.
Yeah.
Like what type of industries do you work with? Like
people identify when is a fractional CFO? When does it make sense? When do you know if you need one at all?
Yeah. So our primary clients, the ones who are kind of at the top tier of our services, are usually having annual revenue of about 3 to 30 million a year. So they may not be in a position where they're ready to hire a full-time CFO, but just having a bookkeeper and an accountant isn't doing it for them, because not everybody in that space, and most people, I would venture to say, in that space don't have an entrepreneurial mindset, whereas we do, and especially he does. So he can really speak to the scaling of a business, mergers and acquisitions, growing your business by adding a new department, any of those types of things. He understands all of the business financial reporting, not just some of it, and how it plays into all the different arenas of your business growth, or if you're trying to get funding, all of these things come together. You need somebody high level that can actually help you make really good decisions that may not only keep you up at night, but actually keep you from growing. So we work with a lot of people that maybe are stuck at a certain level, and we help them figure out how to take a step back, to take a step forward, multiple steps forward. And we work with them on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to go through very specific strategies to make sure that their finances are growing in the direction that they need them to. So we have a financial meeting that's every month, that's very highly focused and has all these beautiful but very easy to understand reports, because just because you're in business doesn't mean you understand all of that stuff just magically overnight. It takes time. And then we have a lot of other areas that we work in, like the asset protection and just, how to protect your business from all of the things that could go wrong financially, everything from your HR, one of the very first things we're going to look at is your business structure, So there is kind of somebody may touch up against the law piece a little bit, but obviously as a CPA, he's focused differently, and it's more focused on the financial asset protection and growth of the business.
Yeah. So
CFO take the place of the bookkeeper and accountant?
We can, although if you have a good bookkeeper accountant in place, we actually prefer that they stay in place because we like having the person that's kind of looking at the past that has an understanding of the business and is already in the business. So with bookkeeping, really you're looking at what's occurring kind of in the present. With your CPA is looking at what occurred in the past. To calculate what your tax consequences are and how much you're going to have to pay. With a CFO, it is looking at essentially what the CPA has created in the past, looking at what the bookkeeper and the accountant have done in the present, but we're focused on the future. So with the CFO services, we're looking at what you've done in the past to find the metrics that have the best relation to increasing your profitability, smoothing out your cash flow, potentially improving your revenue. Although revenue, I would put last in that series. To me, profit is everything. Cash flow is king because it's the lifeblood of your business. And then your revenue, is kind of last on the thing because we want you to continue to grow in your revenue. But I don't know too many people that would disagree with this statement. I would rather keep more money in my pocket than make more money and take home the same amount, right? I don't want more work for the same money. I want more money for less work. And so when we focus in those areas and then we create the forecast so we can look at your key metrics, that's what she's talking about, the reports. We make it very simple. It's colors. It's green, yellow, and red. And so depending on what needs to be focused on, if it's green, you're good. You're operating inside the lines where we need you to be for whatever that metric is. If you're yellow, we need a little bit of work here, and we're going to point out what that work is. We're going to put that on the scorecard so you know what needs to happen, what the action plans are. If it's red, we have a major issue here. We're way outside of the lines where we need to be. So this is our main focus right now. So we go directly to the action plan. We're at here. This is where we need to be. This is how we're going to fix it. Here's who is responsible. Here's when they need to have it done. And here's the steps they need to complete to get back to where we want to be. And so the CFO services is the future. So we're looking at what you've done in the past to create the forecast of where we can be if we do this in the right manner, and then constantly adjusting that so that we know that we're going to hit the targets that we want. And we're also looking at that 5-year plan, because realistically, it's a 5-year plan from when you say, hey, I might be interested in selling the business at some point. It's around 5 years to make an exit, or what they say, exit without exiting, hiring in the right people. You keep ownership, but you're not actively involved in the business. You've created the executive team that's running it for you, and they're producing that profitability that you can live off of. So that's really a 5-year plan. So we're looking at that 5-year plan, doing that forecast out to it, and making sure that we're following the steps to get there. And then we're also helping you through all of those milestones, because the scaling of a business is very different. What you do to get to $1 million is going to be very different from what gets you to 3 million. What gets you to 3 million is very different than what gets you to 10 million. And most people don't know those steps, or they become so focused on getting to that they don't realize that they've hit the ceiling, and they keep doing what they've done in the past to try to break through it. But you can't, because what got you there is not what gets you to the next level.
100%. Now we're approaching the time that we're going to have to end this. So there's 2 things I want to make sure that. So I apologize for kind of cutting you off if you weren't done, but there's 2 things I definitely want to talk about or have you mention before we end this. First thing is, where does everybody find you guys? So tell everybody, all of your social media handles, your website, everything of how we can find you.
Yeah. So we are at CFOAF.com. And you can email us at hello@CFOAF.com. And we are on social media. We do have a YouTube channel, which we're kind of new to it. So, go check us out. Leave us some weird heckling type comments. I think it's at the
odd but interesting ask. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, why not? It's at _CFOAF. And I would say those are the best. And he's on Instagram at the same handle.
Yeah, the _CFOAF, Facebook, CFOAF, I believe. Or
we're trying. Those are probably our best ways to reach us, but definitely email us if anybody has any specific questions. We're happy to see what we can do to get those answered for you.
That's awesome. We might be reaching out to you very, very shortly. Yeah. But I always like to end our podcast with this question. So in the 18 years you've been together and the many businesses you've started and the one that you're currently doing now together, of every one of your experiences, both in business and life, what has been your biggest lesson or biggest takeaway thus far?
You want me to take it or you got it?
I want both of you to tell. Okay. I want both of you to tell us.
Well, he talked about staying in your lane. I would say kind of the inverse or the flip side of that coin is not expecting somebody to take up the lane you don't want to. So a lot of times when we have a high level visionary in a relationship, they have all these great ideas and they're like, hey, I just need you to do these 5 million things to make my ideas a reality. And that's not realistic. It may work for a short period of time, but it's not sustainable. So I'd say that was my number 1 tip is don't try to force somebody into a role inverse from yours just because it's convenient for your business. Really understand, like, in our relationship, we're both visionaries. We both can integrate, but we integrate quite differently, taking advantage of our strengths and then hiring out for our weaknesses, because we can't be expected to do everything that the other person doesn't like doing.
That's a great one. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that. Probably my biggest one is the communication aspect. Don't make assumptions that people understand where you're coming from or what you mean or any of that stuff. Clear, concise communication has just been game changer for us, and not being scared to communicate, right? Like, just because something may seem, that it would go over poorly or that somebody may take offense at it, still you need to have that talk. You need to have that communication, because if you just assume that they understand where you're coming from, or you make, assumptions, assuming is just making an ass of you and me, I think is
100%.
If you have that communication, you can really get through anything, and having that and being open to it is an amazing piece. And as somebody who does not love to communicate, me saying that says a lot, because I would much rather just send you a text or an email than have that communication.
I think all guys would rather send a text.
Yes.
Yeah. I think if you're going to assume anything about your partner in business, if you're married to them, is assume that they have your back always, indefinitely, and go from there. Like, you can't really go wrong with that mentality of assuming that you have each other's back.
Yeah.
Yeah. We always look at, our rule is, what was the intent behind something? If we tried something and it didn't work out, or, we have a conflict or we get into a fight, I'm always like, what was the intent?
What were you trying to achieve?
Because the intent is always good, right? Like, Justin's always like, but I didn't have any bad intent when I said that, or when I whatever. So we have to always remind each other, the intent is always right, and the intent is always there.
My intent is not to fuck it up. Okay.
Sometimes it just happens like that. It's just like that.
Always not to screw things up. That's it.
That's what happens. Same. Yeah. I relate to that.
You guys have been really, really great. It was great getting to know you guys. Nice to meet you. And you actually have a service that we are looking into. So hopefully we can talk soon. We'll definitely be reaching out to you. Thanks for sharing your story with relationship, peeps out there. And I wish you guys the best of luck. And I look forward to talking to you guys soon.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
That's a wrap for this week's episode. Don't miss next week's episode for more relatable, real, and practical insights from Relationship, packed with even more candid conversations. So make sure to subscribe, tune in, and keep your wine glass full. And if you want to share your own experience or ask a question, follow us on social media and feel free to reach out. Go to CernitzLaw.com, call 888-68-DAMAGE, or email us at cshanbron@CernitzLaw.com or jcernitz@CernitzLaw.com.